Hi, everyone. Welcome to Infinite Life, Infinite Wisdom, where we talk all things afterlife. I'm Susan Grau, your host. I'm an intuitive medium, soul healer, author, and speaker. So good to have you here. So, for my first podcast, I'd like to discuss my background and how I became a medium, what happened to me as a child. I had a near death experience, and so on. So let's go. I was 4.5 years old when I was locked in an unplugged freezer for quite a long time by some boys who wanted to play fort with me. And they told me if I climbed up in that freezer and got them popsicles, that they would let me play with them some more. So in the freezer, I went and I climbed up, put my arms up, and I heard the freezer door lock. And then I heard a thud and I realized the garage door had just been closed. And let me tell you, I thought I was in on a joke and it was going to change at any moment, but it did not. And I began to panic. I remember screaming at the top of my lungs over and over again, and nobody was coming. And after quite a while of screaming, I heard, "Stop screaming. We're going to get your mommy." And I saw these three beautiful bright lights. And I decided I was going to keep screaming because I was just a little girl. And so I did so. And they told me again, "Stop screaming. We're going to get your mommy." So I finally stopped screaming and I waited. And I saw these lights moving around me. And then I was gone. And I remember being at the bottom of these stairs and looking up and seeing like this Greco-Roman room. I don't know how else to describe it. It had these pillars that were just beautiful and an open ceiling in a circle. And down below, even though I was on the bottom of the stairs, I knew there was something to see. So I thought to myself, how am I going to get up those stairs? And then I was just there, like pop, I was there. And I was looking into this giant well, the same size as the open ceiling. And over to the left of me were these three beautiful lights. I call them my angels. And I was looking down into this well, which now I understand to be the tunnel, but at the time I didn't. And there was all of this really beautiful movement going on. It was like DNA. That's the only way I know how to describe it. And there were words. And everyone's words were combining together and they were speaking to the spirit world and they were praying, "God, help me. Please help me. Will you get my loved one well? Susie needs this and Tammy needs that." And all of these different things I was experiencing and hearing. And they were all blending together and coming upward through this tunnel. And I looked at these three lights and I said, "Do you answer all these?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Where am I?" And they said, "You're in the room of heart's desires." And when I asked them, "Do you answer all these?" They said, "No, Susie, sometimes what people desire the most isn't good for them." And I can be honest with you, I didn't want to hear that because my mommy had said that to me when I was little all the time. Just because you want it doesn't mean it's good for you. So I wasn't happy with this comment at all. But I understood what they were trying to say in some form. And so I looked out to the front of me and I saw this beautiful, what I called the yellow brick road. And the reason I called it that was because I had seen The Wizard of Oz. And so that made total sense to me, the yellow brick road. And on that road were these beautiful pillars, these giant, beautiful pillars. And I was watching what I thought were humans coming over and pulling from the bottom of these beautiful pyramids shaped pillars, so pyramids, and they were pulling from the bottom of it. And as they were doing so, I could see it rocking. So, what happens when you pull from the bottom of a pyramid shaped stone, you would unbalance it. And I knew at that moment that they were in their life journey and they were unbalancing their life journey. And they started paving their path and they were going along and it was bumpy and crooked and just not looking good at all. And I recall them dropping to their knees in pain and saying, "Please, for the love of God, help me," and other types of calling to the spirit world. And I realized that they didn't know how to pave their path. And in comes these beautiful angelic beings. And they took all the pavers out and they put them back to the bottom of the pyramid. And they went to the top of the pyramid and they pulled these golden pavers off and they would recreate. And they began to pave the path. And I said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "We are the pavers of your path. You are not. All you have to do is walk it." And being a precocious little 4.5-year-old, I said, well, how do you know if you're walking it right? And they said, because we bless and block everything. Make no mistake, you can get through the block battered and bruised at best, or you can shift. And in shifting, if you see another block or wall, shift again. If you see another block or wall, shift again. And before you know it, as you're doing this shifting, you'll see us paving your path. Now, we all know that, any obstacle that we see is on any path that we take, right? So I knew that innately. And I didn't expect it to be perfect, but I certainly didn't expect my path to be what it was, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But regardless, they were there paving the path. And they said, you think you know what's best for you. We know what's best for you. And boy, that hit me and still does to this day. So off I went into another room after some time with them. And in that room was the room of knowledge. And I saw people looking at what I call virtual books today, but they didn't have them when I was a little girl. And I saw people, these books coming in or this information coming in. And I saw them trying to figure out their next journey. And they were saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to be able to do this. And I heard the little spirit world saying to them, oh, honey, I don't think you want to do all that. That's a lot to take on. And they'd say, no, I can do it. I know I can do it. I'm able to. And they would let them. And because they have free will. And I think I was one of those because I had my PhD in hardships for sure on this journey here on this earth. Then I popped into another room after some time in the room of knowledge, and it was the room of companions. And that's where I saw animals. Now, I did not see my animals. I was too young to have lost an animal, and I didn't see loved ones. And I think I was too young to recognize them if I did see them. But I did see spirits walking around and doing life, basically. It was really exciting. It was buzzing. It was a world of beauty. And I remember watching the angels speak, and the words and the music came out at the same time. It was phenomenal. And I think that's why our soul resonates so much in music. I think I've may come to that conclusion since having that experience. And I think I knew that throughout my journey. Like, why did I love music so much? I love to sing. I was a singer. And now I know why. And it makes total sense to me now. But anyway, going back, I remember seeing animals moving around and romping through these fields and having this marvelous time. And I thought, this is so beautiful. And then I remember sitting in the middle of the field and there were daisies everywhere. And I looked to my left, and on this hill, I saw this being. This being was so powerful and so alive and so bright and brilliant. And I just wanted to touch this being. But I knew if I tried to touch this beam, I wasn't going to be able to get up to the being that was standing there. So I left the beam that was shining down alone. And I just kind of sat back and watched. And I just saw this magnificent energy come flowing towards me. And I started to look around, and it was just beautiful, just bright and brilliant colors I'd never seen before. Flowers that I can call a daisy, but they weren't daisies. Everything just transformed into this beautiful, beautiful awareness of everything around me. It was alive, it was buzzing, it was bright, it was pulsating like life, like our heart does. And I could feel the pulsation. After a while there, I saw a dog come towards me, and it was big and beautiful. And later on in life, I really believed that it was a wolf, but I didn't understand that then. But I saw all kinds of little creatures running around, and it was just a phenomenal experience. And then I saw someone come out of this cobblestone building. It was like a little cottage building, and she was floating, and she was coming towards me. And I thought, I want to float, but I couldn't. I probably was, but I didn't think I was, but I felt like I couldn't float. And I saw her coming towards me, and she said, it's time to go, Susie. Now, this was after being there quite some time, and I saw a lot more things, but it's so extensive that I have to cut it a little bit short for this podcast. And I'll talk about those things later in other podcasts. But anyway, she took me to the river's edge, and she said, you were born of water and you'll return in water. And later on, I realized, oh, they're talking about the womb. so bizarre, so amazing. It's so real and tangible to me when I think about it now. And she told me that I wasn't going to have an easy life, but I'd be going back to see my mommy, and that I was going to use this difficult life to help others on their soul journey in their humanness. And I didn't know what they were talking about. And they said, "Are you ready to go?" And I said, "No." I loved it. I loved how I felt. I wanted my mommy, though, the whole time. I wanted my mommy. And I have to be honest about that. But I remember them asking me, "Are you ready to go?" And I said no. And then they said it again. And I said, "Okay, I'm ready." And I remember stepping into the water. And then the next thing I remember was being in that freezer again, but it was so brief. My mother had heard your baby's in the freezer, and she had heard it more than once. And she finally took action. And she went to the freezer and she opened the freezer door and she said, I was in there backwards. And when she turned me around, spun me around, I was ashen, and she dropped me. And she went to go to her phone. When she dropped me, I sliced open my chin and I took a breath. And my mother was very afraid that my father was going to be really angry with her, because she was supposed to turn that refrigerator around and or freezer and belt it down with a belt. And she didn't. So instead of taking me to a hospital or doing something else, she bandaged my little chin with a butterfly and she put me to bed. And when I came back from that, and I was woke up and I was aware, I could see spirits everywhere. They were under my bed, in the corner of the room, down the hallway, in the bathroom. I wouldn't even go potty without calling my mom. I was so afraid. I thought they were the boogeyman, but in truth, they were the spirit world coming in to talk to me and to spend time with me and to help me on my own journey. It was beautiful now looking back, but at the time I'd cover my head with a blanket and say, "Go away, go away, go away." And they didn't go away. And they'd pull back almost like as if to say, "She's afraid." And so they'd pull back, but then they'd come back in. And this happened to me night after night after night. It started to become my abnormally normal life. And as time went on in my journey, I'd be woken up by a spirit and they'd say, "Wake up." And I'd go, "Go away, go away." And then they wouldn't. And they'd say, "No, I need to tell you something." And so I'd say, "Okay." And I'd listen. And they'd tell me, "I just died and this is how I died. And they think it happened this way, but it didn't. And I need you to tell them I'm okay. And I'm on the other side and I can see them," and et cetera, et cetera. And I would write it all down. And as I got older, I would write it all down and I would wait. And the next day, I'd unequivocally hear that somebody's brother, sister's best friend died, and this was their name, and it matched everything I was told. So I'd give them the message. And I remember people would say, "How could you know that?" And I think, "How could I know that?" And that's all I did. And then I went about my life. I had this room in my house then. I used to play with the spirits in the morning and in the afternoon, even in the evening sometimes. And I used to play like Rock It Out with, I'm the Beatles and things like that. And they'd be, Paul and Ringo, and, we'd dance. And I remember then I'd realize nothing was there. And they would see me go to fear and they'd pull away again. And my family called it the creepy room. That's what they called that living room, because I was always talking to spirits and they felt something in there. And my family had this gift, some of the people in my family, and just not quite as powerful, I think, as I did. But I didn't talk about it. And they didn't talk about it until later on in life. So the only thing I would tell my mom is there's people in my room, and she'd say, "Don't talk about it. There's no one there." I think my mom was very fear based with it. And I was too, because I was so little. So as time went on through my journey, I got married and I did the human experience. I did everything all the other humans do because I'm human. Then they would keep visiting me, and they urged me to do something that would help others. So I became an addiction therapist and grief expert. And so I worked in addiction and grief, and I always knew things. So people would come to me and they had a loss, and I would say, "Oh, there's someone here." And then I'd pull back because I knew that at my age, years previously, you didn't talk about those things because you'd be locked up. So I didn't talk about it. And they would have taken my license away. But I just would share just a little bit and it would be accurate. And they would tell their mother and they would tell their friend and so on and so forth. And before I knew it, I had people coming to me that were in grief that wanted to know if their loved ones were with them. I still didn't trust it. So every time they'd say, oh my gosh, how did you know that? I'd be back right back into, and again, till this day, how did I know that? It's a phenomenal gift to have. And we all have gifts. I think being able to sit down at the piano and play a gift is phenomenal. I can't do that. But we all have gifts. And those gifts we use to connect to the spirit world are called our senses. So we're going to talk about that in some other podcasts. But right now, I'm going to go into mediumship. So that is the story, basically, of how I became a medium. It just started to happen. And then I had losses that were tremendously difficult. Both my brothers committed suicide, and it catapulted me into even more profound experiences. And I remember before they did that, my Nana passing away, and I didn't know she died. And she came to me and she started telling me about her journey passing over to the other side. Unbeknownst to me, she was dying at that time that she came to me. So I was actually having a shared death experience with her, which Raymond Moody talks about in his books. I studied under him later on in life. So I learned that that's what that was. I was sharing the experience with her. And I remember picking up the phone and calling UCLA because they were starting to talk about these gifts. And I was able to hear what they had to say. And they said I was a medium. And I hung up the phone and I was petrified and I didn't know what that was. And I didn't want to know. I thought that was something bad. So fast forward, and I am now helping people. And I lose my brothers and my gift catapults, and I'm ready to take a next step. And so I would go to like my little friends' houses and I would say things about their loved ones. And I started to test the waters. And as I did that, I recognized that it was making sense to them. And I was blown away. Quite honestly, I was blown away. I never thought in a million years it would be right information, but it was, and it was consistently right. So I decided that I needed to try it out on strangers. So I'd go to these meetings that I used to go to when I was young, and I would walk in and I'd sit down and say, the person next to me, I'd say, I feel like somebody's next to you. May I share it with you? And they'd say, sure. And I'd tell them what it was and who it was, and I'd share what I would get, and it would be right. And they were blown away. I was blown away, but I kept doing it, kept practicing, kept trying to connect in, kept trying to get someone to let me give them information. And I started to go to people like James Van Prague, who taught me how to turn the dial down because I could never control it. It was just everywhere. So now, today in my life, I know how to turn that dial down so I have control. And that's a question people always ask me. It was a transforming experience to be locked in that freezer, and my life was changed forever. And being a medium was not something I wanted to do, but it is not outside of me. It is part of me. It is part of who I am. And so when people would tell me I was evil, or if it was Satan coming in, and I heard all kinds of terrible things when I was young. And at my age, that was the normal way of thinking. I didn't know what to think. And I would say, that's not true. I'm helping people. And I was so afraid to go public. I actually remember the first time I made a decision to tell everyone, and Facebook had just come out. And I wrote on there, I'm a medium and I talk to dead people. And if you don't believe me and you don't want to be my friend, you can just sign off of me right now and defriend me. And no one did. And I think a lot of people already knew, but I didn't know. I didn't know they knew, and I didn't know what I was, but they did. That was a gut-wrenching experience for me, by the way. I remember busting into tears, crying in terror that I was going to be rejected, and quite the opposite happened. So moving forward, I continued to take lessons and study and practice, but I was doing readings the whole time on the side. I wasn't doing it for a living. I was doing it to help people. And of course, I do that now to help people as a living, but I wasn't collecting funds. Let me just say that. I was still doing counseling. I was trying to grow and heal myself from my own journey, from my own losses. I wanted to be the best at what I did, but I needed to do inner work, what we call wound healing, the dark night of the soul type healing. And so I was doing that while I was doing readings on the side. And it just kept escalating from there. And during that time, I remember getting a lot of downloads from the spirit world of things that I had seen that I didn't understand. And downloads just means that the understanding would just pop into me and I go, "Oh my gosh, that's what I saw. That's what they meant." And that kept happening to me throughout my life. So I was getting an expansive awareness. My soul was expanding in a knowledge base of the spirit world, and they were continuing to visit me. And that was my journey. And I knew nothing different. So for me, it was normal. And I remember when someone came to me and said, "Prove to me that there's an afterlife." And I said, "Prove to me there's not. And then I'll work on proving to you there is." And they were in shock. And so was I. But that's how I protected myself. That's how I made a statement that said, "I'm not going to get prove to you anything, and I get to be in charge of me. And if you want to judge it, that's okay. But I can't play that game." And I didn't know how to prove anything to anyone. I could tell them everything I knew, and they'd still say, "Well, you probably, found that out some other way." So there was never a way to prove it. Then I think as we woke in our country, and I think we have a lot, and I see it happening more and more, we started to believe, and more people started to investigate and learn more about the spirit world and the spiritual journey. I educated myself thoroughly. I do want to say that I am a Reiki master and I am a grief expert, and I have licenses in counseling, and I worked on intuitive work, and I have certifications in healing modalities all over. And I received my doctorate of divinity with Raymond Moody. And I love to work with children who have near death experiences. So that was my next step, my next right thing to do. But being a medium and a healer entails being able to remove my limiting beliefs and step outside of myself and actually click into the person in front of me. It's like almost like something like a hydraulic mechanism that I look in their soul and it just goes and it drops down, and I go in and I feel who they are. And those are one of my senses, and that's called clairsentient. And I am clairsentient, and I'm able to feel. Clair means clear in French, and I have clear feeling. I also have the other clairs, claircognizance, which is a clear knowing. I just know their loved one's there, and I just know what they want to say, and I know how they died, and I know their name, but I don't know how I know. And I attribute that to the spirit world. And then there's clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. And that to me is the easy one, because if you see something, it's tangible to you. So that to me was the easy one once I wasn't afraid anymore. And there's clairaudient, clear hearing. So there's all these different clairs that we use and they use with us to connect us into them. And mediums use their clairs and they make sense of their clairs as they learn and they practice. I learned how to be right by being wrong. And I know that doesn't make sense, but let me explain. I was a person who felt like I needed to be perfect at my readings. And still to this day, I want to be at 99% accuracy, and it's impossible. I'm having a human experience and I'm going to be wrong. But what I realized that being wrong taught me what that felt like. And so I want to share that with you so that you learn how to connect into your loved ones. When you are inaccurate about information, when you're practicing, you remember that feeling. And then you remember the feeling of being accurate. And so when you get that inaccurate feeling, you go, "Oh, no, that's not right. I know this feeling. Let me leave that behind and move to the next sort of information I'm getting." And so we kind of sort through it very rapidly. And that's how I learned to be accurate. At the end of the day, being an intuitive medium doesn't mean we're perfect. And certainly I'm not. I've done some things throughout my life journey that definitely are not perfection. Definitely not, as all of you have. But what I do is I get rid of my limiting beliefs and I step into the spirit world as if they're right there, human, in front of me. That's what I try to do. They're here, they're talking to me. I'm going to trust it. So here's an example. Your loved one comes to you because you ask them a question and they give you an answer in your head. And you say to yourself, "Well, that's just me thinking that's what they'd say." Well, right or wrong, what you just taught them is you're not going to listen when they come into your mind and give you information. So what you want to do is, right or wrong, you want to say to them, I believe that's you. I'm going to trust it. And then they say, even if it wasn't then that time, they say, oh my gosh, she's going to listen to me if I pop in her head and give her messages. So now I'm going to do it all the time. And before you know it, it's happening over and over and over again to you. And you start to trust it. Because really talking to the spirit world at the end of the day is all about the trust. It's trusting what you're receiving is real. So that's how I learned to become a medium. And that's how you can learn to become a medium. And in other podcasts, I'll be talking about how to guide you into mediumship so that you really can connect into your loved ones and trust it and know they're really there. Once they know that you trust that they're going to be there, well, they're going to be there. I promise you, they're going to be there. I wrote this book called Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, and it's wisdom from the spirit world on living, dying, and the in between. And in that book, I share all the practices you can use. I give you exercises and examples on how to click into the spirit world. And it's on pre-sale actually right now, and it'll be out July 16th. And in that pre-sale, if you go to my website and you buy a book, I'm going to be doing 13 different months for the 13 different chapters to study what's in my book with you personally and with a group of the people that pre-order. And we're going to learn these exercises, and I'm going to help you, guide you into contacting your loved ones. I also offer an ebook that you can download if you pre-order. So that's pretty cool too. And that teaches you also. So here's, what a message might look like from a loved one. I'm sitting in a room, I think of them, and all of a sudden I hear, I love you to the moon and back, which would be something my mother would say. And I would think, well, that's odd, right? As what's my mom doing here all of a sudden? I wasn't thinking of her earlier. And then I look over and there's a hummingbird tapping at the window. I'm going to trust that. I'm going to trust that. And once I tell her, Mom, I know you're here, I hear more and I hear more. So that might be an example of me speaking to my loved ones. Or I might see them go across the room. For someone else, when I'm reading them, I might be sitting in the room with them and I might hear, oh, your father passed and his name is Jim. And Jim's telling me blah, 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 blah. Maybe he was an alcoholic and that he loves you and he's sorry for how he treated you. Or he just wants you to know he's safe and secure on the other side. So he's going to give me information. He was a welder in this lifetime and he died from cancer and so on. And that information, by the way, when people hear me do that and they go, oh my God, and I can see them literally physically move back and cover their mouths. How did you know that? And I'm thinking, oh my God, how did I know that? But I don't tell them that because I'm supposed to be the professional, right? But I always think it. And I think that's being in humility, that we are always in awe of the spirit world. But what happens is that they recognize them. In my room, they recognize their loved one on the other side. And the calm that I see come over them and the knowledge that their loved one's still with them. You see, we don't die. We just transmute or vibrate in a different energy. That's all. And I know that it's so different and so painful and so gut-wrenching sometimes when we lose someone. Death is not easy on this planet. But once we gain the knowledge that they are still there with us, it makes it a little bit easier. It makes it a little bit more transforming. And we're able to speak to them and be with them and have a belief that life exists on the other side. And that kind of belief system will influence your interactions with others, your interactions with them in the spirit world, and it helps you recognize the value of mediumship. So, mediumship simply means talking to loved ones, for those of you who don't understand what it is. Every time I click in, I can feel a change in me. It's as though I've left myself behind, which is exactly what I need to do. When I walk in that room, I need to make sure that I've left the guy who cut me off and I'm upset with behind, or the argument or disagreement I had with someone behind, or my stress or lack of sleep. All of it needs to stay away. And so I set the intention when I walk in that room that all of that stays outside of the room and that I'm fully present for the person in front of me and for the world above me or beside me. They're actually vibrating very close to us. They just vibrate much, much higher, and their frequency is much, much higher. One of the questions people always ask me about mediumship when they come to me and I've done a reading for them, why don't I get that information? Why aren't they talking to me? Well, they are, but I'm going to give you an analogy. Picture yourself as a sloth, very slow moving, high vibrating, but slow moving. Now, picture a sloth in grief. The sloth lost their mom and their vibration drops. Now you're very low vibrating and you're slow in movement. You live a human experience. So I might be like the butterfly. I'm kind of in the middle and I'm vibrating a little bit higher for whatever reason, whatever I've learned in my practicing, etc. And let's picture the spirit world as a hummingbird. By the time the hummingbird has gone everywhere they've gone, and by the time the sloth has the ability to look to see where they are, they've gone 20 different places, maybe 60, maybe 70. So they've missed it. That's why you don't see everything. And I, as a butterfly, can only see partial because I'm not vibrating to that frequency. That frequency is so extremely high. It buzzes. Let me just tell you, as I said, everything is alive and it buzzes. So I'm not vibrating at that frequency. So I can only hear certain things. I'm sure they drop in front of me and tell me everything, but I can't hear it all either. But I hear more than the sloth and more than definitely someone who's in grief. Hatred, anger, grief are the lowest vibrational energies. So what we want to do is raise our vibration. And the way that we do that is to dance or sing who wants to do that when they're grieving, right? So we don't do those things that raise the vibration. So it's very hard for them to reach us. It doesn't mean they're not there. They are there. They've never left you and they will always be there. They are right next to you, vibrating on a high vibration of peace and love and wonder. And, people say to me, are they in peace? And I say, yes, but it's not the kind of peace you think of. They're still learning. They're excited. They're in a beautiful place that buzzes. They're not laying there going, I'm in peace and serenity. I'm Zen. That's not what's happening. That's not what I saw. It's like a hologram because I did see bodies and it's like I could reach through them and they were expansive, like all the dimensions in one hologram body. So, I knew that there were not human, but spirit human like energies all there. So people also ask me, one of the big questions is, will I see my loved one when I cross over? And the answer is unequivocally yes. They will always be there for you. They will never be gone. And I want you to understand that so that you can be encouraged that you will see your loved one again. And I am 100% sure. So you will be with them again. They will be there for you when you cross over. So I have something called Speak Pipe. And you can go to my website and ask me questions that you want me to answer on these podcasts. And I'm going to spend about 10 or 15 minutes on each podcast answering those questions so that you can learn more about your loved ones on the other side, where they go, how they are, and maybe even how they passed, depending upon what kind of questions you're asking. So we're going to have that Q&A. I'm going to talk about personal stories, some of the readings I've done, some of my personal stories. I'm going to interview guests. And so my future episodes are going to be really full and all about the afterlife. I'm really excited about being here with you. I thank you for joining me. Please come back again and listen to the podcast because I really think that it will help you grow in the understanding of the afterlife. But most importantly, I want everyone to be able to connect into their loved ones and to understand that the spirit world is there, circulating around us, in us, through us. One thing I do want to say before I go, they can't read our minds. And I know that some mediums believe that, and I honor that, but that's not what my experience was. And they can't see private things. And the reason is because they're not interested in our humanness. They're interested in our love. They're not interested if we're going pee or if we're, changing our clothes, etc. They're interested in your soul source, your love. That's what they want to tap into. So never worry. They're not seeing everything you're doing. And I think I'd lose my mind if I actually thought they could see everything I'm doing. But I want to encourage you to continue on your path of learning about them, of generating in their energy, of expanding your awareness, expanding your soul, because that's why we're really here. And we're going to talk about that in other podcasts, in the future podcasts, about life purpose versus soul purpose and what we're doing here and how do we find out what that is. And we're going to have some really amazing guests. So share your stories with me. Go on to SpeakPipe, and you only have 90 seconds, but you can give me a little bit of what the question is, and I'll take it from there. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, and welcome to Infinite Wisdom. I'm your host, Susan Grau, and please remember, they're only a heartbeat away. Take care of you.